You have failed this castle. So when I first spent time with the iMac Pro, it was the 10-core, multi-terabyte, all the memory, all the storage version, ultimate performance. So when I asked Apple if I could spend a little bit more time with it, if I could see how it fit my workflow, they said sure, but how about we send you the entry-level version, the $4,999 version, the one with 1 terabyte, with 8 cores, with 32 gigabytes, with the AMD Vega Pro 56 graphics card. And you can see how far that'll take you. You know, a lot of your readers, a lot of your viewers, a lot of your listeners, they want to know how far they can push the base level silicon. And I said, challenge accepted. So everyone should be familiar with the iMac Pro by now. It's got the same 5K DCI P3 display as the standard iMac. I mean, I remember when I first saw it at Apple's town hall when they announced it, the 5K display, it looked better than real life to me. It looked like I could fall into it. And the iMac Pro is exactly the same. We can see here it's running macOS 10.13.3. It's got a 3.2 gigahertz Intel Xeon W processor. Now, Xeon W is something new. Previously, they had Core i7, and that's like a race car. It just takes peak speed and tries to get you from here to there as fast as possible. And then they had the Xeon line, which has now been rebranded as Xeon Gold. And those are like the trucks. Those just want to take as much cargo as possible, as far as possible. And Xeon W, it's sort of like a full-size pickup truck. It doesn't go as fast as a sports car, and it may not have the maximum workload of a truck, but it's still pretty peppy and it'll get you where you need to go. For memory, I've got 32 gigabytes of 266 megahertz DDR4 RAM. This is ECC RAM, so it's server grade, it's maximum reliability. And I've got that Radeon Pro Vega 56 with 8 gigabytes of memory. Now, if there's a knock against AMD and the Radeon cards, is that they're a jack of all trade. They're optimized for work. They're not necessarily optimized for games. And people always want to know, why doesn't Apple work with NVIDIA? Why can't I get a 1080 card? Basically, both want to control the graphics destiny. Apple wants maximum control so they can move everything out of the way and write directly to the metal. And NVIDIA is big enough and powerful enough that they want things done the way they want things done, and the two just can't come to an agreement. AMD, on the other hand, is happy to let Apple do anything it wants, so Apple is happy to stick with AMD. So I spent a little bit of time in Logic editing podcasts, but Final Cut Pro and video editing is where I spent most of my time. And that includes multiple multicam clips, compound clips, color corrections, overlays, effects, title sequences, and more. And through all of it, those 8 cores have been a champ. I think once or twice I managed to get them to cry uncle and say, can you please turn off the multi-angle viewer, even for a few minutes? And I did, and a few minutes later it was back and it was fine. But I originally thought I would need those 10 cores and I would need that maximum turbo frequency rate. But I've been absolutely fine with the 8-core version. It was the 1 terabyte of internal storage that caused the most pain for me, at least initially. I was probably overly optimistic with the thought that I could keep the minimal amount of internal storage and use external storage for everything else. Theory being that if the internal storage failed, I'd have to pack up the iMac and take it back to Apple. But if the external storage failed, I could just go to a backup drive or swap it out or buy a new drive. It's much easier. But what I didn't count on was Final Cut Pro filling out that drive as quickly as it did. Now, I ended up turning off optimized storage because the iMac Pro is so fast it doesn't need any of that stuff. And now it's much, much better. But I think in the future I'll stick with 2 terabytes internal. The memory hasn't been a problem either, which is great, because while the new iMac Pro looks a lot like the traditional iMac, because they had to move a lot of stuff around internally, create a whole new thermal path for the device, the RAM slots are no longer user accessible. And that means if I did want to change it or I did want to upgrade it, I'd have to take it to Apple or a certified service provider to do it. Graphics was another story. I think for most tasks it was fine. They're full desktop-sized graphics cards now. They're not little mobile cards anymore. But I like VR. I have an HTC Vive. I enjoy VR experiences, and I was looking forward to trying the first Mac that natively supports VR out of the box. It doesn't require an eGPU. And when I tried it previously on the 10-core iMac Pro with the AMD Radeon Vega Pro 64 card, it was great. I didn't see a hint of stutter. Everything was fantastic. With the 56, though, there was reprojection. There was a little bit of stuttering, a little bit of stammering, and it just wasn't as high a quality experience. Now, there's technically no reason the Vega 56 should have to go into reprojection, but SteamVR and HTC Vive support on the Mac is still very much beta, and there's likely a lot of work that has to be done to still optimize that pipeline. When it comes to ports, Apple did Pro right this time. You have 4 USB-C/Thunderbolt 3 ports for maximum forward compatibility and maximum throughput, but you also have 4 USB Type-A ports for compatibility for all your old and existing peripherals and accessories. Yes, you still have a 3.5mm headset jack for your audio gear, and you have 10 gigabit Ethernet. So if you work in a production environment, you can share and be shared through everything. There's also an SD card slot, which is great because I'm producing a lot of video now, and it's probably the port that I miss most on the MacBook Pro. But the only thing that is missing is an HDMI port, but you can get that through an adapter. Now, should you upgrade from your existing iMac? If you do a lot of things that are dependent on single core performance, then no. The standard iMac is the race car. It has got the absolute fastest single core performance. If you do need multiple cores, if you want to have a ton of apps open all the time, be able to switch to them in an instant and never have to worry about turning some off or waiting for some to start again, then the iMac Pro is a great upgrade. If you want desktop quality graphics and you want to do things that are beyond the mobile graphics in the standard iMac, also a great update. If you have an old cheese grater Mac Pro or the 2013 Darth Vader helmet Mac Pro, do you want to go for the iMac Pro now, or do you want to wait for the modular Mac Pro and Pro Display that Apple's been teasing since last year? The future is always great, but the future is never now. So if you absolutely need a more powerful computer, a Pro machine right now, then get the iMac Pro. If you're happy to wait, then wait and make your choice when you see what both your options are. The iMac Pro is always going to be the neater all-in-one solution, but the Mac Pro might be something that you can tinker around with, upgrade, and configure for years to come. So bottom line for me, a few hiccups and workarounds aside, the 8-core iMac Pro is doing everything I need it to do. For example, I can pull this footage down and start editing it while I tell you that Casper mattresses are awesome and that you can get $50 towards select mattresses by visiting casper.com/vector and using promo code VECTOR at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. But you can be sure of your purchase with Casper's 100-night risk-free Sleep On It trial, again, because Casper mattresses are awesome, and I can be done with it in no time and right back to my bottom line. If you do want to do a lot of things that are core intensive, you want to bump those up to 10 cores, to 14 cores, to 18 cores. If you're doing a lot of things that would benefit from the unbelievably fast internal storage, then yeah, go to 2 terabytes, go to 4 terabytes. If you want to have zero constraints when it comes to memory, you can bump that up to 64 or 128 gigabytes. And you can put that big Vega 64 card in there. But for me, the 8-core version has been fine. If you want to get in on the iMac Pro, but you don't want to spend a fortune, or you just want that space gray, it's a great way to do it.
Malcolm Merlin, Slade Wilson, Damien Dark, and I never liked you, Batman.